The reason I am here is because I care about the opinion of the Post-Dispatch. And I think today's editorial, I think is wrong in several areas, and whether it's just interpretation or perspective, I don't know. But from my perspective, there's some issues that have gotten commingled that don't belong commingled, and because I care about your opinion, that's why I wanted to talk to you today.
Let's break it.
And so if you don't mind, as you said, I've got some notes, but the very first issue involving the stimulus program is that I believe there is a misperception that the dollars can only be spent in economically distressed areas. And certainly that's the view of Mayor Slay, and that's been the mantra of the city. But the reality is now, Mr. Roth, and please call me Pete, requested some information and cited the one area of the law that referred to the economically distressed as a priority. And then, but also within that very same bill are two other sections.
Sure.
And the other sections refer to, the language within that, and I'm not trying to play a lawyer because I'm not a lawyer, but it does say recipients shall also use grant funds in a manner that maximizes job creation and economic benefit. Those two are not connected. It's not, it's an or. It's not linked that you can only maximize job creation, economic benefit within economically depressed areas. Those are two separate priorities that we have received guidance from the Federal Highway Administration. Let me just back up for just a second to try to explain then how this all comes together. And that is this. If you can picture a sieve after a sieve after a sieve after a sieve, and we dump in all these projects, and we can only work with those that pass each one of these tests. And so obviously the first one is, can it be delivered within 120 days or within 1 year? And within all of that, we also have to meet all of the requirements of NEPA, all the conditions of air quality conformity, and all these other conditions that are put on Title 23 funds. So we still have to meet all of the other requirements of receiving federal funds, but we've got to be able to deliver projects within 120 days or within 1 year. So you dump in all the eligible projects. And these eligible projects have to come from three places. They either have to be in the STIP, which is the Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan. They have to be on the TIP, which is the Transportation Improvement Plan that's put together by the large metropolitan planning organizations like East-West Gateway. Or they have to be on a long-range plan. So if they're not in the STIP, TIP, or long-range plan, we're prohibited from putting that project in. So what goes in the SIV to start has to be TIP, STIP, long-range plan, and since we cannot supplant any projects that we were going to construct with state resources, meaning to match other federal funds, between now and September 30th of 2010, that also means we can only look at the STIP and the TIP for those outer years to advance those through. So it has to pass that test first. Then, if it's passed that test, again, the kinds of things that would be excluded is if a project doesn't have, obviously it's environmental clearances, if it's got right-of-way issues, if it has utility issues, all of these things make a project toxic, and it just means it's going to be excluded, from the list of eligible projects that we can deliver under stimulus. So we continue to work our way down. The bill also has a requirement, which is not typical of federal highway funds, that specific amounts must be spent within communities of certain ranges. They've always had this sub-allocated portion of the funding, and in the case of the stimulus bill, the dollar amounts that are going to sub-allocated represent about 2 years of what they normally receive in sub-allocated funding.
The controversy now are the funds that you can allocate any place in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no limitation on those. And I don't think that we've ever said that the money can only be used in distressed areas, only that a priority which implies that, there may be reasons not to do it. The grievance, and I do understand a lot of this detail, but you want to finish your analysis.
Because, yes. See, now you criticize us, all right, so, and you criticize us for having nearly 40% in non-economically distressed areas, and which means it's 61%.
No, I think that's true. I think what we criticized you is for not offering any explanation of why a priority has not been given to 40%, which is more than a little bit, and it doesn't say give slightly more than half, it says give a priority. So if you're not going to give a priority to 40% of the allocation, then I think that it's incumbent on MoDOT to offer an explanation as to why you opted against giving that priority. Is it because there's not enough projects in the distressed areas? Is it because they got caught up in one of your little sieves? Some explanation.
And the answer is, actually, the answer is by the time you go through the matrix and to get all of the boxes checked for all of these projects, we end up with what we have. Now, again, it's not only the test of economically distressed. It's also the test. We can also put projects into those areas that maximize, whatever the wording which I read to you right here, which was, yes, which, and those two things tend to be in different areas. Economic development specialists will tell you the area that you're most likely to be able to generate more jobs and support economic development in those areas that are also already doing well, and so therefore they don't tend to be in those regions that are economically distressed.
As far as I can tell, you have not done a project-by-project analysis of what even in a broad sense, how this maximizes job creation and economic benefit over another project that, say, is in an economically distressed area. And so my question is, have you done project-by-project written analyses of economic benefit and job maximization?
And the answer is no, and the reason is because that is a totally unrealistic expectation. The reason, if you look at the economic analysis impact that we've received on the 141 corridor, which is the largest dedication of funds in the state, and that is the one that has an economic analysis for the project that says it's going to generate 9,000 jobs and $1 billion a year for 20 years. Okay, there's a very strong statement about economic development. That took them 9 months and $38,000 to produce that analysis. The idea that we would then be able to do that with all of the universe of projects is just, frankly, an unrealistic expectation given time constraints and costs associated with that. But we rely upon and work with our planning partners and the projects that they have prioritized. And every project that we have has come from planning partners. And we have 22 various organizations in the state that make up our planning partners. And those are the MPOs like East-West Gateway, but they also represent regional planning commissions and other MPOs for smaller cities. And so across the state, we've been working with our planning partners to distill down these lists as we've gone. And the process, which we've been accused of not being transparent on, the reason there's so much conversation about transportation right now, I believe, is because we have been transparent. Every time we've produced a list that starts, creating a work product, we've distributed it. And if you look around at the other stimulus funds that are being, that are going to be distributed around for whatever purposes stimulus allows, of the $4.4 billion that's coming to Missouri, the conversation is about transportation. And the reason it's about transportation is we have released, every time we generate a list, we've released it, and we've gotten feedback on it. We've tried to, expand in areas where we've gotten feedback that said you don't have enough. And we've continued to work upon this matrix that says not only do we have to have, the dollars for the suballocated, which we have no control over, but it also says then you have to have $17 million worth of projects in areas, communities of 5,000 or less. You have to have, and I don't know the number, I've got it in here.
About the 420, that's been my focus. There are some that you have to peel off for special cases. The $427 million that can go any place in the state is governed by guidance that says prioritize in distressed areas. Recipients should maximize job creation and economic benefit and get it done relatively
Fast.
quickly.
That's
Now,
right.
Get it obligated quickly and then get it done within a fixed period of time. I understand
Yep.
all of those criteria.
Yes.
And it's one thing to say you've released your projects, but what you have not released is your analysis as to why some things have been chosen and other things have not been chosen, and how you justify your selection, because you're allocating a lot of money, and a lot of people are mystified by the projects that you selected. People who have a sophisticated outlook on what represents a distressed area, how you maximize job creation and economic benefit, and how you get sophisticated engineering projects that are done, and who understand that the shovel-ready element of it, that a lot of things have to be out of the way. And one of the things that people tell me who are
Well, it's East-West Gateway. I mean, it's East-West Gateway is who you work with, so.
No, I talk to people in different areas who are learned in construction trades and have a sense of how all these things fit together. And so let me ask you a couple of questions. One of the criticisms that I've heard is that you've added your own sieve, one that is not required by federal law, by limiting the projects for that statewide money to those that are state properties, that are state roads. And then, since this is federal money, while you would be constrained in that way on your own projects, for this federal stimulus money, there is no constraint. And if you're short of projects of your own, which you'll have to tell me whether that's one of the reasons that you've ended up with the list that you've had, because you have a limited universe of projects that are ready, why don't you reach outside of your own projects and go with other governmental agencies that have projects ready to go that better satisfy some of these other criteria? So the question is, one, have you limited it in that way? And two, have you done that of your own volition? And three is why? And
the answer is yes. We have limited it to the system that we are responsible for. And the reason it hasn't been distributed onto other entities, which some states have chosen, is the reality that our system is comprised of many roads that in any other state would be county roads and city roads. And so the system that we are committing resources to, that's our road system. What you can see is there's 32,400 miles of roads in Missouri that are eligible for these funds, and in other states the numbers are in the 10 to 12,000 mile range. And they distribute some of their stimulus money onto county and city roads because of the nature of their system. In Missouri, our system encompasses such a large percentage of the roadways in the state that placing the Title 23 stimulus funds on our system's roads are benefiting beyond what would normally even occur in another state that does choose to put money on other projects.
But if you want to select the best projects, and by that I mean the ones that most closely meet the criteria set by Congress in giving us this special money, why wouldn't you look at all projects, transportation projects, rather than just look at your own? For example, one of the things that I've heard, things that I've heard as to why MoDOT came in with such a low number, and we'll talk about that later, for the city of St. Louis, was that it just did not have that many projects that were at the state of readiness that would satisfy the timeliness requirements. There's a question of why that would be in the city of St. Louis, but let's just assume that that's true. The city of St. Louis says it has a laundry list of projects that don't fall under MoDOT because they're not state roads, but they are ready to go and can satisfy all the engineering requirements to prove that they could be done within the time period. Why wouldn't you consider them among the universe of possible projects that could receive this unencumbered money rather than set up your artificial barrier, even though you're responsible for more roads than other states?
We have never said that the city did not have projects that could be ready to go, but as we went through our process and we identified where would the projects occur, which were the projects that we could get out the door the fastest. In the beginning, the conversation was we were told we would need projects out the door in 90 days. not even this 120. And so as we were identifying projects, and that's what was represented by the list that we released in December. And we said, all right, if we have a $25 billion stimulus package for roads, and again, we picked that number. We had no idea where this was going to go. I mean, it ended up at 27.5, but we picked this number of 25, and we said, all right, if we get 2%, then $510 million is what we're going to have to deal with. And if we have to have it out in 90 days, go through the STIP, go through TIPS, go through what we can find, and what can we identify right now that's ready to go. And so that was our first take in December, before we ever even saw legislation. And then we got to, from December through February 10th, we worked with planning partners, and we said, this was counties, these are the regional planning commissions that have county commissioners on them, they have city councilmen on them, they have local government representatives, and we worked with planning partners and we said, tell us what are your most important priorities for your region. And those went on all around the state as we worked with planning partners from that December list all the way up until February 10th, when we had a statewide planning partner meeting in Jefferson City, in which all the planning partners came together and said, these are the projects that are most important to us. And so the process generated from local input, the projects. And well, it grew and it filled out. If you look at our first list in December, if you look at our list in December, there were things like $50 to $60 million on minor roads, right? I mean, it just said we could get that out, and because we've been hearing from planning partners that the minor roads are deteriorating too fast, and we've got the other issues that probably wouldn't be appreciated by the Post-Dispatch, but we worked with them and said, all right, here's this. So now that turned into literally 108 projects. That one number turned into 108 projects. We said we're going to put $137 million onto interstates, and that's been our goal, was we put that in, but that's turned into a dozen projects around the state. And so this grew, the list grew, but we stayed focused on what we've been talking about all along.
I understand that, but the question I have then is, why didn't you open it up? If once you knew what the federal requirements were, and that Congress was saying, this isn't just an internal deliberation of the state transportation agency trying to figure out what it can get out fastest, but it is saying, we want you to set a priority for in distressed areas, that projects in distressed areas are to be a priority, that these aren't just transportation funds, these are economic stimulus funds. So we understand you have your plan and your sort of order of rolling things out, and equity is a matter of transportation, from smaller roads to major arterials to bridges to all that kind of stuff, that you have your engineering time frame. They're saying that's not what this is. This is economic stimulus through transportation, and we want a priority given to distressed areas, and we want you to maximize job creation and economic benefit. Now, tell me how you kicked into overdrive to adapt your list that had gone through this process with all your stakeholders, to reshape it so that a priority was given to economic distressed areas and to job creation and economic benefit.
Well, and the first thing we did was to take the list that the partners had already told us were priorities. I mean, again, this list was not solely generated by MoDOT. Even the December list had come from long-range lists of regional priorities that had been compiled by planning partners. So this was not just simply a wish list that we put together. It was a list of projects that we identified that we could get out extremely quickly. If we were to use only the test of economic distress, the reality is that, and not use the piece we've not talked about, which is the commission policy. The editorial criticizes us for shorting the St. Louis region and its fair share funds. And the commission formula that we utilize to distribute these funds, every time we have dollars available to us, state and federal, we utilize the commission's formula that's based on objective facts, and it produces a percentage that needs to be distributed.
I've read it, and I've read the backup of it. It's
Okay.
an amalgam of vehicle miles traveled and
Population and jobs and workforce and all of that.
Yeah.
And
I have criticisms of that too. In
Well-
this context, I can understand as a general matter of making of rough justice in dividing transportation dollars that there's a logic to your formula. But there's nothing in your formula that focuses in the way that this federal money has been conditioned, which is to say in distressed areas and priority to maximizing benefit.
Yeah, but like take for example your however you
Tuscumbia Bridge.
Yeah, your Tuscumbia Bridge.
Uh-huh.
That's a little bitty. There was a reason that hadn't been done because it's not a priority. It had been sitting there for a long time. It needed doing. People really wanted it there. It would be a nice thing to do. I can understand that the people are just tickled to have it done. It did pose some safety risks, but not the kind like in Minneapolis where you think it's going to fall down, because if you thought that, you'd close the bridge down, and the bridge hadn't been closed down.
Well, actually, we already restricted trucks from it,
Right.
and we had to put
Okay.
metal, we had to put steel
Right, but
supports on piers underneath to
But
keep
you were
it up.
letting you were letting
We
people
were letting
travel
cars,
around.
we were
Right.
letting cars
Right.
over it.
Okay, all
and-
good, all good.
Yeah.
And if the Missouri Highway Commission had said in 2009, at long last, the people in Tecumseh are going to get that relief that they've been waiting for a very long time. Okay, but you want to know something? I think that isn't the vehicle count like 12 or 1,500 a day, and it's a fairly
about that.
expensive.
But see, this was already in, that was in the STIP for 2012.
Okay, well,
So it was already
Right.
a project that the commission and the process has said, this is a project that needs to be done,
Right.
and it was going to be funded with when things occurred. It was one of those projects
where
that
you could
met the
supplant-
test.
Well, but you want to know something? Does it meet the? Is it in the distressed area? Well, maybe it is. Does it meet?
Yes, it is.
Does it meet the maximize jobs and economic benefit? I don't know. I guess you'd have to analyze what all the other candidates are and set up some kind of rough scoring so that you could achieve that.
But see, you use the planning partners to prioritize those projects that are important to their region, and the basic understanding of this whole process is that the locals will know within their region what projects are going to be the highest priority
But that's
for
not
their
what
region.
The standard is. The standard
But-
is that the federal government has entrusted you and the governor with saying, I mean, they didn't say, go to your planning partners and then put a list together of what they think is the most important.
And I'm comfortable with this list. I think we've got a list of however many hundred projects around the state that meet the test of being projects within economically distressed areas, of projects that support economic development beyond just simply that project, and also will create jobs simply undertaking the project.
Not create,
And-
maximize. That implies a relative kind of measurement.
And you can't. And I was going to say, but what you have to understand is within the time constraints, and with Congress creating an entirely new frame. This is an entirely new framework of language that has no guidance, no direction, nothing. It just says, we want you to do this stuff fast, we want you to maximize these, and I believe the process that we use meets the intent of Congress.
Well, show me your analysis of how these projects maximize job creation and economic benefit. What is your analysis of, not just of the projects that you selected, but the ones that you didn't, that show that the ones that you selected are better than?
And I would say that is an unrealistic expectation to believe that you can have an economic analysis of hundreds or literally thousands of projects and then to attempt a process within this 120 days or even within 1 year. Our normal STIP process is an ongoing process that we are choosing projects that we are going to deliver 5 years out. And this whole, the biggest complaint that there has been about trying to use infrastructure as a way to jumpstart the economy has been these projects cannot get done quickly enough.
All right, so I just want to be clear on this. MoDOT, neither MoDOT nor the Missouri Department, Highways and Transportation Commission have conducted an analysis of the projects.
Comparing one project relative to another through some economic modeling.
Right, so basically you have done nothing analysis-wise.
No, that's not true. If we believe that if you look at these projects, where they're located and what they are accomplishing, we believe they meet the tests of the intent of this law. We believe that's there, and we don't believe that the law requires a relative comparison of one project over another. That's a level that you're placing on this that's not in law and is not in any form of guidance and that we receive from the federal government.
Well, then let's just go with your definition, which I don't agree with, that you think that as long as you have projects that create jobs and economic benefit can be done on time, and you still haven't explained to me about why 40% are not in distressed areas, why priority hasn't been given to 40% of your projects. Why is that?
Okay.
Exactly?
Well, let's start
You
with
started saying that it's an economic, that it creates more economic benefit in a general sense, but you have not done any analysis of that.
See, now we also another sieve we have to go through is the commission's policy on the allocation of spending,
But
right?
that's not
Of
a
expenditures.
federal requirement, is
No,
it?
but it is a choice of the Highway and Transportation Commission in the allocation of these dollars. And that allocation is what's providing over 30% of these funds to the St. Louis region, which you're saying in the editorial is an unfair distribution. And so if the logic of saying that, if it wasn't in a economically distressed area, it shouldn't have been spent.
I didn't say that. I'm saying justify.
Well, but no,
so,
but
so
that's
your justification, and this is what I'm clear on this. The reason, or one of the primary reasons, that 40% of the $427 million is not being spent in distressed areas is because the Highway Commission injected its own distribution policy, geographic distribution policy, as something that should be given priority over the federal standard. Is that true?
No, it's a requirement along with the federal policy. It is not instead of. It is a way that the commission ensures that each region of the state gets a fair share. And it's that policy that is producing the dollars that are being spent within the St. Louis region that is a positive to this region. And it's those projects that generate, and I believe maximize. If you look at the projects here, you can look at the 141 project, you can look at the Page Avenue. Those are economic development projects that are going to generate jobs beyond just the construction of the project itself.
Well, maybe so, but just so that I'm clear on it, the distribution policy that you talked about to ensure fairness, as you say, within regions of the state is not something that is required under federal law.
No,
Is that true?
it's a requirement of the commission.
But not federal law.
That's right.
Okay, so you are elevating a commission policy over the federal standard that requires that priority be given to distressed areas by distributing projects as you have. Is that true?
If we were only utilizing just simply the federal law, we would not have a distribution of projects that would allow all regions of the state to receive projects that are going to benefit their region. The commission's policy is to ensure that all areas of the state, urban and rural, are going to receive projects that are beneficial to them. And I can tell you already, the conversations that I've had, the conversation that's occurred right here is far different than the conversation that I have in other areas. When I say it's far different, the essence of it seems to be the same, which is we're not getting our fair share because everyone believes that they should have more than the dollars available. And that's, at the heart of all of this is the reality that we've got enough funds to address about 1.6% of the
understand.
projects that are being demanded of us.
All the more reason to be especially wise in your choosing. Wouldn't you agree?
And I believe we have been wise in the choice of our projects. I believe the list that has been compiled in working with 22 planning partners around the state represents a very wise selection and use of the available funds.
Okay, let's talk about the original allocation to the city of St. Louis, which is a distressed area. When the original $5 million for repaving Memorial Drive was the only project in the city of St. Louis, and I spoke to the chief engineer, one of the reasons ascribed to that was that St. Louis already had two big projects underway, namely the I-64 project and the emerging Mississippi River project. And so that was sort of like St. Louis is already the beneficiary of two big projects. So are you aware of that explanation that was given?
I've heard that.
Is that the reason that St. Louis only got one project that actually had already been partially funded? I think that the net benefit to St. Louis was $1.8 million out of the 427.
I mean, I've heard the mayor use that number. Our number is that there's $5 million, committed to that project, and that our approach has been throughout this that this would be an ongoing fluid process, and that we would continue to look for projects that were of value.
How do you come up with that? I mean, that $5 million, and this is just sort of as a matter of proportion and looking at the criteria.
The difference is if you're looking at this as a single, standalone, program without any other inputs into it, then the question is, well, why would St. Louis only have this? But we look at transportation as being one of these 5-year programs, and what is going on within the region, and what are needs that have been put off in order to make room for others.
You're a practical man, and you had to realize that when the city of St. Louis was going to end up with just this little itty bitty thing, that was going to cause people to sort of question the entire program. I mean, didn't you see that as an odd allocation? And do you think that it was justified by the fact that St. Louis has the I-64 Mississippi River Bridge project?
I think that you have to look at what was said at the time of each one of our compilation of lists, and that was that this is what we have to date, and we are going to continue to work on this list to fill it out. And so at no point have you seen anything that said this was the final list. These are the final projects.
It wasn't the final list, but it was a published list, and that was your first cut, was that St. Louis was going to get almost next to nothing in terms of the relative scope of the
Well, that's their interpretation, but that doesn't mean. I mean, again, it was an ongoing process. We released our work product at every step of this timeline.
But when asked about it, though, people didn't say, "Oh, there may be more." They said, "No, we're going." The explanation I got was $57 million is going to go to East-West Gateway Council, so they'll probably get some of the city will get some of that, and you guys are already getting I-64 and the Mississippi River Bridge. Does that sound like the company line at the time? Because that's what it was to me.
No, I think I heard that.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Right. So,
And I didn't say that, but I heard it.
Yeah.
And
you're the director,
and at that
right?
point, and at that point, I mean, as far along as we were in the process,
Yeah.
I went, well, you know what, that city has gotten a lot so far, and we need to look at the region, and we need to make sure that people are getting,
But isn't the city already paying for I-64 and the Mississippi River Bridge because of bonds that were issued that will be paid out of future allocations to the city?
everything that goes on within this region, everything in this region is essentially self-contained within the commission's formula. The commission, listen though, because this answers your question, and that is everything that goes on has to be an agreement within the region as to how the project, the dollars that are available are allocated to projects within the region. And the only funds available to pay for those projects are the end result of the commission's formula.
Well, that's my point exactly, is that you were saying that St. Louis was entitled to less from the federal money because it was getting this bridge and this highway this Interstate 64 reconstruction, when in fact it was already paying for that out of their future money. So weren't we getting nicked twice? My
take is not that it's the city was shorted, it's the region is receiving X dollars, and how is the region going to utilize these dollars? How are the dollars going to be utilized within this region? And the city of St. Louis is not a standalone entity. It is a part of a region, and the dollars going to the region are, as in the editorial, which says the region has been shorted. Wow. And I disagree with that, because the formula that the commission has adopted to ensure that there is a fair distribution of dollars has been applied, and the dollars available to the St. Louis region produce.
But I'm having a hard time squaring that with the official line that I got, which was St. Louis is getting only $5 million because they'll probably get a chunk of the East-West Gateway money, and you're already getting a bunch of stuff as though that were above and beyond, when in fact that's already coming out of our hide as a region on the bridge and Highway 64.
Well, those projects were in fact agreements with other areas of the St. Louis region to basically let these projects go forward. They'll take their time and wait for the day that their projects get funded. I mean, that's how the region works, and the region has said, you know what, we'll allow these dollars together collectively will fund the new Mississippi River Bridge, but at some point in the future we're going to need our project funded too, and a regional approach has got to take it under those circumstances. Otherwise, you end up with this, the political concept is just spreading peanut butter. Everybody gets this little bit, and the end result is you never have enough money aggregated together to accomplish anything of significance.
I understand the logic of that, but that still doesn't answer the question of why you were using those two projects. Your staff was using those two projects as justification for the city of St. Louis getting less out of this new pot of federal money. It doesn't add up. Would you agree that was not a correct analysis? I think I've answered it.
It's I heard it was used. That's not the way I've described it, but again, that when you look at the region and the major projects, there still are major projects that are going to need to be funded within the entire region that may or may not fall into the city limits of St. Louis. But it's as a region, the percentage of available dollars every year, every time that MoDOT makes a decision, the dollars that come to the St. Louis region are a fair share of what we have.
Okay. If I wanted to tell my most engaged readers where to look so that they could evaluate the economic and job creation benefit of each of the individual projects that you're approving, where would they look? Where could they find a narrative that would explain to them why widening this road or building, this culvert is, where would they find that? Would you just tell me?
Well, the only economic analysis impact statement that we've been provided that would meet a test is going to be that St. Louis County provided us their impact, their analysis of the economic impact of 141.
What about the rest of the project?
And the rest of it, we are using the REMI model, which is the Regional Economic Modeling. I think it's Model Incorporated. I think is what REMI stands for. And the REMI model says that our STIP every year produces $4.61 for every $1 spent. And so we're having to use macro models.
You're just applying that to every other project.
That's what's available to us.
Every other project are equal from the standpoint of economic benefit, and that there's no individualized analysis. Is that
That's what's available to us today. The expectations that have been created by this, as there's a perception out there that this represents this avalanche of money that's so large that everybody should get their piece. And the reality is for us that by the time you take out all the sub-allocated and you take out the transportation enhancements and you take all this out, the dollars available for MoDOT to allocate are at $525 million, is probably it's a hair less than 60% of what we have every year.
You know what? That's still a lot of money,
Yeah.
and there's a lot
But
of stuff that needs to get done.
It's not a lot of money when you're dealing with a 32,000 mile system that's spread out with $31 billion worth of needs. To you and me, it's a huge amount of money. To you and me as individuals, this is a huge amount of money.
You know what? It's not a question of measuring against a 32,000 mile system with all its needs. It's a matter of measuring against creating the best economic impact with a priority given to distressed areas that you can within a fixed period of time. It's not shuffling through, and I would say that that's sort of my biggest beef about how MoDOT has approached this. It's approached it like, oh, we got another shovel full of money to serve our 32,000 mile system, and we're going to pretty much allocate it like we would if we suddenly, for some reason, got a $500 million appropriation from the General Assembly, and that's not what this is about. And I just feel like you guys have not hustled around the economic part of it or the distressed area part of it, and that you could have done better.
See, and my response would be, to that would be that would represent a vast underestimation of what is simply required to get a highway project out the door and ready to go.
Okay.
And from the outside, this might look easy, but I have to tell you, from the inside, what is available to us to get out and get people to work turns out to be a much smaller universe than what you would suspect. And
it especially does when you self-limit it to projects that are within your system. If you open it up widely to credible governmental players who can get projects done, then it might be a little bit easier for you. So you handicap yourself in part by limiting it to your system. And I would say that is one of the big criticisms that I've heard about it, is that you wanted to keep it all for your stuff, and now you're saying, how can we get it all out the door? You don't know how long it takes to do this stuff. When you have people on the outside saying, we do have projects that meet this, that do have an economic impact and that are in distressed areas. And we can't even get to first base with MoDOT because they want it all for themselves.
And I would say that it was Congress that made the decision. There was a major effort that, in an approach to Congress, to take a package for infrastructure and give it to essentially the League of Mayors. The cities and then the counties all said, get us money, we can do it. Congress looked at that and said, we don't think that's going to be the way the projects get delivered quickly. And they said the states are the vehicle by which these projects are going to be delivered.
Nothing prevented you from doing it, though. Nothing in the money handed to you prevented you from saying, City of St. Louis, we trust your engineers. County of St. Charles, we know that you guys know how to do a good job. And we know that you can get this done in time. So a part of this will go into your distressed area or will go to advance the demonstrable economic positives that your project brings. You kept it all yourself, and there was no requirement that you do so. And
if we had a shortage of needs, then it would have made sense to go beyond it. But the fact is, we have needs.
But that's not your needs are not the issue, though.
But see, it is, and I believe that we've met. I mean, again, we're just repeating ourselves now, but I believe what we have delivered is a program of projects that will do what's intended, and that is to create support jobs and to circulate money within the economy. That's this is the focus of what's going on here. The vehicle that was chosen by Congress as one of the stimulus was to utilize highway highway and bridge projects, and they provided that to the DOTs across the country. That's why the money's coming through Title 23, and we are doing, and in fact, I believe we are doing very well on delivering a balanced and fair share of projects across the state. And I can see you don't agree. And
I'm not satisfied. I think that you have retreaded your needs, as you put it, in a way to make them look the most that you can make them look like the requirements of Congress, rather than taking seriously the requirements of Congress and engineering it that way. It would have been harder to do. It would have required more work in an already busy schedule. But I think you were obligated to do it, and I don't think you did it. That's my objection. My objection is not that St. Louis got X, it should have gotten Y. Those are just sort of evidence to me of the fact that you approach this in terms as just a chunk of money to meet the needs of your transportation plan, rather than as economic stimulus.
But that's not what your editorial said.
I think it is.
That's not what this editorial says.